Welcome everybody to Toronto Awakenings Sharing Groups meeting. Welcome everyone. Hopefully everyone has made it in out of the waiting room. I'm Dr. Yvonne Cason, the leader of Toronto Awakenings Sharing Group, and I welcome all of you. We, as you probably know, Toronto Awakenings Sharing Group was founded 2 years ago as a safe space for people to come together, to share, and to learn about the whole spectrum of spiritually transformative experiences, near-death experiences, mystical experiences, psychic phenomenon, Kundalini awakening, etc. And we used to have meetings here in the Toronto area, but since COVID, we've been doing it online. So welcome everybody. Now we have people from various places joining us. So why don't we take a minute now and please type into the chat where you are joining us from today. Our speaker, Lewis Brown Griggs, he is joining us from Berkeley, California. And we have a few people from Toronto. We'll take a look at this list after everyone's had a chance to enter it. I know Robert Bear is joining us from Oregon. And Shala is from Prince Edward County. We have somebody from Burlington. Ooh, one person from Chicago, another from Barrie. Hello, everybody. Glad to see all of you. Calgary, we've got Paul from Calgary. Welcome. And some more people from Toronto. Awesome.
And notice that if you wish, you can even add on your name, like I have just done. You go to the upper right and click on rename, and you just add your location if you wish. That's all.
Thank you, Lewis.
That way it's fun to watch and see where people are from.
Thank you, Lewis. That's a fun suggestion. In case you guys didn't know, that's our speaker, Lewis Brown Griggs, who just made that suggestion. So the format of today's meeting, in a moment, I'll be introducing Lewis to all of you, but I'm going to be keeping you all muted. And if you have any questions, just type them into the chat, just like you typed in where you're from. And Lewis said that he may, because he's been going to be talking about several experiences today, he might pause partway through to give you a chance to ask some questions then, and then pause again. And then we'll have our regular end of the session question answer period at the end. So please put your questions in the chat at any time that you have them. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker of the day, Lewis Brown Griggs. I am so absolutely delighted that he's going to be speaking with us today. Lewis is joining us from Berkeley. In case you don't know, that is in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. And he was raised close to the Canadian border in Minneapolis, St. Paul, which is in Minnesota. Before the event started, he was telling us about his adventures driving north of the border and seeing moose and all sorts of stuff in Canada. And he remembers when you could use Canadian and US coins interchangeably. Those were the days. Anyway, Lewis is going to be talking to us today about his 3 powerful near-death experiences, which he calls NDEs or OBEs or STEs, so he'll get on to that. One in March of 1977, another in June of 1997, and then most recently from August 6th to 16th, 2020, when he survived COVID-19 on the respirator and arrested twice. So he'll be telling us about those experiences. In his training, he's got a BA in political science and an MBA in entrepreneurial management, but he felt propelled by his NDEs. He felt called to work in the field of diversity consciousness. So I'm sure he's going to be talking a bit about this. In 2012, Lewis became a certified professional coactive leadership coach. And for decades, he's been active teaching and facilitating local San Francisco Bay Area IANS groups. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Lewis Brown Griggs, who is going to be our featured speaker today. Lewis, please go ahead.
Great. I thank you. And I'm so grateful, Yvonne and Robert, for coming out of IANS like I did and expanding not only your consciousness with freedom, but all of ours. because I, like you and others, have had more than one experience, and they have different titles. If one is righteous enough to say, oh, that's called that and not that. So I will talk about that as we go. So one way of starting, because it sort of relates to all three of my amazing learnings, and learnings is what I like to share more than the details of what happened. I find my experience out of body is of use to you in case you've had similar experiences, and the learnings from them may be of use to you in similar growth. So I make this much less about me, even though I'm telling one story, but you all have amazing stories from which not only you learned, but we can all learn. So that's my attitude as I share with you today. And so I'm going to introduce sort of how I grew up, because that's why I needed the learnings I needed out of my experiences, my crises. So I grew up in Minnesota, as you were told, and I'm a 14 generation all English lineage from the Mayflower and a boat afterwards, where I'm only 12 generations, but all English blood. So start with just noticing how much righteousness you have to have in 14 generations to say, I'm only going to sleep with and marry a 100% Anglo white, not these other white immigrants, much less other immigrants who are less white. So that's actually very relevant. And then they were all very successful after about 6 generations of one entrepreneur, and helped create the state of Minnesota, and then even helped create the state of Washington, and all the lumber and food and everything. And so they perceived themselves only to be the leaders that they were. But I'll never forget, this is sort of giving away my diversity consciousness that I hadn't yet had growing up. I had pure ethnocentrism. But I certainly learned about slavery and how awful that had been, and how those people down there did that, and we in the North never did that. And in fact, it was the same entrepreneur who created all the wealth of this family for generations that was also a colonel in the Civil War. So there was great pride in not believing in racism and not understanding really that. And yet I never once heard one word about what happened to all the Native Americans that enabled my family to feel like they helped create these 2 states. Whew. Okay, so that's what I grew up under, for better and worse. Yes, free private education and intelligence and leadership, and luckily a lot of love instead of abuse, but I'm 100% privilege. And yes, you could say in the 1%. I sat with a Black diversity leader recently who started his session by saying, I just want to share with you all, without anger, just the truth, that I never in my life have experienced 1 minute of 100% fairness and equity in this culture. And even though I've been doing diversity training for 35 years then, this was about 5 years ago, that enabled me to have another deeper feeling for what I already knew in my head. And I was able to say to him and the group, wow, I have to admit that as I grew up, I always had 100% of every minute fairness and equity. Or so I thought, until I realized not everybody else did. So again, that's an intro of this lifetime in this body. I've had other lifetimes I'm aware of, but that's another conversation. In this body, that's how I was raised. And therefore, after I drove from Boston and public television station in 1976 all the way to be with my first love, who was in law school in San Francisco, I switched to public television in San Francisco. And right after I got here, I started feeling on the spiritual level, if you will, like, what am I really going to do when I grow up? I started to feel a little lost in the sort of late 20s, which is when they say most men finally get their full brain working, most males. So whatever, there's a word for it, I've forgotten. But and I had worked in government for 2 years after Amherst College, and I'd worked in a startup company for 2 years, and I worked for 2 years in Boston as public TV, as I said, and now 2 years in San Francisco. And I thought, I still don't know what I'm supposed to do when I grow up. So I needed a lesson and a question. And on March 11, 77, I totaled my automobile in a crash in which I had no injury. But the experience I love this session today because we have time to share what happened with each of them. And the experience I had, I immediately left my body and I passed all of the other places that I've heard from other people's stories. So I didn't watch the accident. I wasn't watching surgery. I wasn't meeting deceased relatives. None of that was my experience. I was called through the so-called tunnel so quickly that I came out the other end and you've heard from many of us say there are no words that are enough, but the only words I can use is that when I came out of the other end, I actually just experienced nothing except 100% of the source, I like to say the source of all energy and all light and even all love and even, yes, all knowledge. And I was there. I didn't have all knowledge. I don't want to be that arrogant. I could feel, quite humbly, in fact, that I was really at the source of all. And before I heard a voice talk to me, which I'll share with you in a moment, just in that experience of discovering that I was just this part of the source, and I already knew I'd had prior lives, so that made it easy for me to recognize, wow, if my soul and all of your souls come from the very same source of all energy, then we are all one. In that way and to that extent, the source of our soulful energy is all one. And then we land in these bodies, and in each of these bodies is the only specific DNA that has ever existed in life on Earth. I know we have much in common with other humans, with other mammals, with other classes, with other religions, with other races, with other people in other countries and other ethnicities, and with siblings and parents and other people that are also the same identified gender. So just get that right away. Now we know we are all one and uniquely different, and in many ways similar, and in many ways different. And by that all being true simultaneously with every single one of us who's here today, we can connect with each other. We have the opportunity, should we choose, to feel safe, to connect with each other in this way, like, wow, look at each of us. And when we look right in our eyes, we get a better feeling of, wow, we are really one. And then we look at our bodies and go, wow, we are definitely uniquely different, all of us. And yet we're differently wonderful, So that was a key learning. Then the next key learning was I heard a voice. And this voice that sounded much like mine. I guess one hears whatever voice in whatever language and whatever gender one needs to hear it so that we can hear it. So I heard this voice immediately tell me why I had none of these other experiences that others had had. And it said, Lewis, and I had, these words are the same since they happened. In all the years I've been sharing this story, I promise it hasn't changed. It hasn't exaggerated. It doesn't sound more or less wonderful. The words were, Lewis, you are called here to have this conversation and to be sent back because you are not doing your work. It was very clear, which went with, why did I feel like I wasn't yet doing my work and wondering what my purpose is and what am I supposed to be doing? But the way I was raised, which is why I started with that, I immediately, it's as if I raised my, what is hands in a Christian way to say, I surrender, take me, I'm yours, I will do your work. Thinking I was being called to be a missionary to teach all the rest of you who don't get it, how to get it. And when I said that, the words were, no, Lewis, it isn't my work you need to be doing. It is your work you need to do. That's a good lesson for all of us, isn't it? And I said, well, what is my work? What I didn't say, but what I felt is, hey, I'm here in this place where there's all knowledge, and now you're even talking to me. Please just tell me what my work is. But no, instead, when I said, what is my work? I was asked a great question for all of us, which is, well, what is the way in which you prevent yourself from being, not doing? Because remember, I grew up where I could do whatever I wanted and was raised to know how to do. So I really mean this for myself. What is it that keeps you, who can do whatever you want, from being all you're capable of being? Instead of just this successful stereotype following these rules in this tribe, right? Sorry, when I cough a little, it's left over from the COVID, and I'll get there. I'm lucky to be alive. And breathing without a machine. Anyway, so what keeps me from being all I'm capable of being? And given again why I told you my history, I was able to say, after going very deeply, well, I think it has to do with how I was raised, which I therefore don't need to repeat here. And I was taught with honest love, authentic love, that we are all one, quite spiritual parents and loving each other as equals. I was very lucky. We're all one. But here on earth, we're not all the same. And of course, here where you grew up and wherever you each grew up, there was a different version of this story, whether you were it or someone else was it. You all know what I mean when I say, we're all one, but here, you're it. We're it, I was told. With all this privilege, the noblesse oblige, you must give back. And there's balance in that and authenticity in that. And yet what came with it, always came with it, was a degree of arrogance and class righteousness and lots of privilege. So much privilege that I really did grow up never feeling arrogant, but feeling kind of lucky and guilty that I could do whatever I wanted and get wherever I wanted and fly wherever I wanted and drive wherever I wanted and visit whatever I wanted. That I was, we're all equal, right? The government says we're all equal also. So I knew how to act like I'm always equal. I can go into the space you are, etc. Until I learned later, well, yes, we're all supposed to be equal, but it doesn't all happen that way. So when I said I didn't, therefore, being so privileged and ethnocentric, I didn't know anything about anybody else who wasn't different, who was different than I. I couldn't understand the differences. And so I didn't know how to do any of the what's called bridging to help with you, to have us connect and communicate. I didn't speak your other language. I only spoke this language. I didn't know where you came from and what it was like for you to grow up. So I didn't do any of the bridging. And one reason I didn't was not only the ethnocentrism, but you, the other, who didn't come from a 100% all Anglo tribe with such privilege, you had to do all of the bridging just to adjust to dealing with people in bodies like this, with privilege like this, and ethnocentrism like this in this continent. So I was told by the voice, well, just like in the best moment in the movie Amadeus, if some of you remember it, when Mozart hit this perfect note and went, there it is. It's like when I said, I don't know how to do any of the bridging with anybody different, this voice said, there it is, Lewis. There's your work. And I was immediately, without another word, just sent back down high speed into this tunnel. High speed. And landed back in this body. And I actually remember what it felt like. It was like, finally, I get every inch of every finger until it's totally into the body. It was like tight rubber surgical gloves, totally. Until once I'm in the body, I can't do that without my finger. It's like all this white light around me just went out of my 8th chakra, or out of the car, or out of the space. And I was just in this body, and there was no physical damage in this totaled automobile without a seatbelt in 1977. And I walked out of the car and said to the ambulance that just arrived, well, I'm fine. Nothing happened. And they took me anyway and checked me out, and they released me. So that's the first story. And because of that, doors started to open that I had nothing to do with, nothing. And that was my first learning back in body, because I always knew how to open every door I wanted. So when I learned to feel what happens when we walk through doors that open, that we feel called, instead of us having created it, that's a great opportunity, I learned, to just go in. Now, did I feel easier going in because I had privilege and thought I had the right to go in? Let's own that that must have been part of it. But I'm saying the new part of it was I could feel that I had nothing to do with that, nor did my people. This was a spiritual door opening. Go in, Lewis. And through that experience, now to end the story, I and my global wife at the time, who's still a friend, we started the first diversity training in the United States in 1982. And the purpose of it was her words, it was perfect, to teach other straight white males who don't get it how to get it. And you, Lewis, are it. And there's no shame or blame in that, and what we white males need to learn. It's from ethnocentrism, etc., in history. And I really loved, I had to learn myself, no shame, no blame, but just own whatever the truth of our histories is, right? And recognize it. And I even like to share, wait a minute, the biggest problems on this earth happen all over this country with people of many different colors, many different amounts of melanin. So the biggest problems on earth aren't caused by whiteness, in my opinion. But in my opinion, they're caused by maleness. That we males have a lot to learn to be able to do as well as females do. Not all the time. I'm not talking about either they're perfect or we're 100% imperfect. But, look what's happening, whether it's in Syria or in Mexico or in the US or in, wherever, without treating each other all as one. And wouldn't it be easier if we did? So anyway, I've spent 40 years now doing diversity training, and I spent almost all of it just helping to get everybody to do it, because nobody was doing it then. Not focusing, I didn't want to make white males feel uncomfortable, but that's what I did. And I was called to do that work, and I never stopped learning, because to go into the field as a leader, knowing nothing, is a very interesting way to go in and start by owning, I don't know. I'm learning from each and every one of us every day. Total humility and total gift of just loving what I'm able to learn by not knowing. And then to teach, I can't teach what I hadn't learned myself. So anything I'd learned, I could then teach in facilitating others. But it's really mostly just humbly learning. So any thoughts, questions, concerns about anything I said? Because it's so different than the other two. Excuse me, I'm picking up my watch off the floor. I dropped it. Because it's so different. I want to hear if there are any questions or thoughts about that or that experience before I go into the other one. And if there aren't, we'll wait till the end when we all have the time to talk. But anything from any of you before I go on? Raise your hand or mute yourself and speak.
If anybody has any questions for Lewis at this point, please put them in the chat. I mean, I'll just make a couple comments while we're waiting for people to type in the chat if they have a question. What really struck me as you were speaking, Lewis, many things, but you know, as a person who's been researching near-death experiences for many years, and as someone who's had 5 myself, I thought that what was really awesome was that you actually were not hurt in this experience physically, but you had a full-blown near-death experience. And in my books, I talk about this as the facing death type of near-death experience, right? That you actually don't even have to have a scratch on your body, but something about when your consciousness thinks, oh, I'm going to die, that seems to be enough of a trigger to launch this experience. So,
and then
wow.
I'm told that we're going to send you back. I didn't even have to think about, do I get to stay or go back, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, right now we've had no questions in the chat, so I think everyone's mesmerized. So why don't you go ahead and continue with your next story?
Right. Or I put them to sleep. and by the way, for those people who've never had what's called a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience or a transformational spiritually, or all of the versions, some people say that. Instead of me being one who says, well, I have, I'm sorry you haven't. I'm the opposite. And I go, wait a minute. You've had dreams, haven't you? And in our dreams, we're out of our body. And some of them are pretty amazing, aren't they? And in our meditation, some of us have left our body. And in drugs, some of us have left our body. And so you don't have to have a crisis that takes you. And in fact, I also quite humbly say, when people say, my God, why have you had 3? And my wife says, could you please not be a cat that has 6 more? You know, just stop. And I say, you know, I must have needed to get hit that hard to learn what I needed to learn. And if you've had none, and you just have this peaceful, meditative life without crisis, well, you're doing really well. So, okay. So I hadn't learned enough, apparently, after 20 years of being a leader in diversity training in the country. And now notice, as I get into the second one, you'll know why I'm telling you this. I had been chosen not only because I was the problem, but also because I had some of the cultural skills to utilize, some of the privilege, and some of the education to be able to go raise all the money from corporate leaders to convince them that this was worth doing. This was part of what their work needed to be. Many of the Fortune 500. And so I brought with me not only spirit, instead of just a 60s kid doing the right thing to reverse past wrongs. No, I actually wasn't driven by that. I was driven by pure spirit. But I couldn't talk light, love, energy, and spirit, because what would executives have said? They would have kicked me out. So I went and got a Stanford MBA. Not because I care about profit maximization, but because I needed to learn the language of people who look like me so I could sound like them so that they could trust me. when I was really talking to them about maximizing human potential in the workplace and maximizing personal, interpersonal, organizational effectiveness. But what I was really trying to do was to have them feel within themselves and among each other spirit and light and love and energy. Okay. But as I said, that wasn't the language in which they needed to hear. So I needed more, however, I needed more learning. So on Father's Day, June 15th, 1997, when my bipolar daughter, it's another part of learning, we all have learnings. I have a normal child that's a engineer at GoPro, and I have a bipolar schizoaffective daughter who spent a lot of her life in treatment and in help and in institutions and on the streets, but has a degree in psychology and is wonderful. And it's just been my greatest teacher. So here I am on that Father's Day, June 15th, 97, having been up in Montana celebrating her graduation for 2 years of basically 8th grade and 9th grade getting treatment. And I said, wow, you are just, see how amazing you are? And of course, bipolars say, no, they're full of it. They don't get it. But nevertheless, she was amazing. And and I said, this was great. And we had her 10-year-old brother with us. It's another story about why neither her biological mother nor her stepmother went with me. But here I was celebrating graduation and said to her, you know, I've taught you skiing and nature and outdoors hiking, but I've never taught you whitewater. Are you willing to go with me tomorrow on a whitewater river trip? And they went, sure, Dad. And so we started the next day in the middle fork of the Flathead River in Glacier Park, Montana. In case some of you know where that is. It's so beautiful. And as the water got faster and faster, my 10-year-old son looked at me and he didn't even need words, which were, shit, Dad. His words were nothing. And I said, Ian, trust me, you're going to love this. And we still laugh about that because those were the last words I heard, the last memory I have of what was in the press, not only from Montana, but was on television and in the newspaper in San Francisco because I was well known here. And that's how severe this accident was. One of those ones you hear about and you go, it's not possible. How did that happen? A 100-foot tall tree had fallen off the edge of the river and landed on my head and on my son's head in the raft. It missed my daughter, but my son had a fractured skull and was drowned in the bottom of the raft. It was now filled with water, face down. That's what I'm told. He's alive now and he's fine. I'm alive now and I'm fine. But I was dead, they said. This tree was on top of my head still as my head lay on the side of the raft, totally fractured skull, blood, pus everywhere, just dead. And then somehow when they removed the tree, they discovered that I did have some life. Excuse me, my heart, my lungs were working. And yet they had to tie me up because I was crazy. I was dysfunctional. I couldn't speak anything except gobbledygook. And the brain was so damaged. And we were lucky that a helicopter was flown from an hour away, only because a woman on the side of the river happened to see what happened and happened to have one of those cell phones with a box in the trunk that was really powerful, and the phone was this long, and she called 911 and an ambulance helicopter flew from an hour away, took my son back when they found out they pumped the water out of him and said he also was alive. But they told my daughter, that he only had an hour to live probably. And while she was holding him, could she please just look in his eyes and talk to him, and that might keep him alive. And the helicopter took him away because he only had 2 hours to live, they thought. And the helicopter came back because I had 4 hours to live. And then it took me, and we were in ICU together in this hospital. And my family was called and told to come, probably have to take the dead body back the next day. But when they arrived, I was in a coma. And I was in a coma for 8 days. And when I came out of the coma, I had no idea who all these people were in this room. The brain damage was so severe that I didn't know who I was. And I couldn't really talk or read or write or walk very well. I was like, I wasn't back in my body at all. There was so much brain damage. Now, we don't know the answers to why in the first story I told you, I have perfect memory that's never changed. We thought memory was in the brain, and brain was in the body, and the body was in the total car. Well, why did I have perfect memory of that? And why did I not, in this one, have an experience out of body for which I had perfect memory? That meant, as Yvonne sort of said, the first one passed me in ions perfectly with an NDE. Are you kidding me? I not only went through the tunnel and had light and had the conversation with God and came back. Whew, I got an A+. This one, they said, that's not a near-death experience because you didn't go into the light. But I really nearly died. They said I was dead. The first one, I didn't have damage. So language is just language, and we need to all become clear about what we're speaking. So my greatest learnings actually weren't, as I remember, in the light. It was in the experience that, in a way, we've all had with whatever crisis we've had, where we had to learn that the next thing I'm going to say, the learnings we had out of this crisis is at least as great as the crisis itself, or greater. And that doesn't mean we're glad the crisis happened. But the learnings were amazing, weren't they? So I will say very briefly, I spent 3 years doing hospitalized brain injury recovery before they thought I was back. And I say that was about 70%, because out on the street, as we know, 70% is good enough. But let's say among all of us who are brilliant, genius people, that we know what it feels like when we're not all we can be, whether it's the flu or whatever. So I was about 70% back. And it took 2 more years before my daughter, bipolar daughter being the most sensitive of all, anybody with these differences that makes them dysfunctional in some ways has other gifts better than we had. I hope we all know that now and are able to look at them. Her sensitivity was so amazing. She said, "It took 5 years, Dad, until you were the same dad." Whew. So instead of telling you about what the 4 and 5 years was like in recovery, I want to tell you not only that I had gratitude every single step. Maybe it was easy because since I was so damaged, I didn't know what was missing. Whereas, I now know exactly what's missing from the COVID and the cancer I'm going to tell you about. And I don't love what's missing. But then I had no idea what was missing. So I was so grateful for every week when I was able to relearn something new and go, oh, I used to do this. And I used to know how to do this really perfectly, much better. I hope I can learn that again. I'm serious. That's how grateful I was every single day. And it started the first week with the biggest learning I want to share with you, which is, remember, in the light, I learned we're all one. I experienced my consciousness among all of ours. But now, in the first week of trying to learn how to walk, holding these bars, I had an experience I can only simplify quite a lot by saying, picture a tornado or a hurricane wherever you grow up. And we all know that in the center of all this energy is pure stillness, right? At the very center, there is no energy. And here I was discovering as I tried to walk that everything was wrong in this body. Now, I can't ignore that the heart and lungs were working and the organs were working in this case, which didn't happen in either cancer or COVID, okay? So yes, the body was, the organs were working. The physiological body wasn't working at all, or almost at all. And the consciousness, there was none. Even the sense of self, personality, I'm a dad, I'm a tennis player, I'm an MBA, I'm a coach, I'm a spiritual person, I've had a near-death experience, I'm a father, I'm married, I'm white, nothing, no sense of at all who I am. So think now, just to exaggerate the tornado, everything outside the center, our core in the middle of us from the 8th chakra down, everything starting with every part of our body and our personality is like the tornado, it's like the hurricane, outside of our essential core self. It wasn't accessible. And I'd spent 20 years being a master of all of that, right? To succeed at doing the spiritual work I'd been doing. But now it was all taken away. Why? In fact, why was it the left frontal lobe? Is there any part of a straight white male that works better than the left frontal lobe? No. The very part of the brain that had me be so successful was now taken away. And so that I could learn that in addition to just being all one and uniquely different, at my very core, I am and you are 100% light and love and energy and spirit in every chakra, wide open in your soul, which never can be damaged, never dies. The soul itself isn't the one that's damaged and wounded and died. The body is, the personality is. That was an amazing learning that helped me in every single step of recovery, of just going, well, the rest isn't working, but I'm okay. I am. And after thousands of years, philosophers finally said, no, no, Lewis, forget I, that's ego. Yeah, your I is coming back. Just am. We just am, every single one of us at our core. And when we can feel that and enable and allow all the rest of the body and the personality to feel that and come from that, wow, we become so authentic that we're able to speak with one another out of spirit and authentic energy. Yes, I'm using words. Yes, I'm still in this body. Yes, I have a personality, and it's different than Robert's and Yvonne's and yours. But it's, at this moment, it can get in the way if it's not only used just as a tool. So when I speak with each of you one-on-one, and even in this presentation, I'm sure you can feel moments, I hope, when you feel 100% authenticity. And I promise, whether it's 10% of the time or 90, you can feel this white male yuppie wasp talking the way they talk and talk, and if I slip out of authenticity, my wife and my kids and you, if you know me, will say, Lewis, get back, get back. So it's a constant process for each of us. Can I be before I do? Can I be in connection with you and soul and spirit and oneness? Are we safe enough so we can then share and learn from one another's amazing similarity, amazing oneness, but also amazing diversity about which we know nothing and can learn endlessly from one another's life experience in that body. Okay, that's a huge learning. Huge learning. Okay. All right. What else do I need to learn? Well, any thoughts or questions on that one before I go to cancer and COVID? Raise your hand or put it in chat or just unmute and speak.
Well, we do have one question for you there.
All right.
And this one is from Shala. It's a comment. She says, this second awareness also is available through, for example, different types of yoga, enlightenment, intensive practices. Again, not to do with death.
Exactly.
And I think you alluded to that earlier on, right?
I promise you, I thank you. And that's a great example of how you just, when you do that, you don't need to get hit so hard to get it, as I did. Okay? It's exactly correct. And other people say they had it in just meditation, and such deep transcendental meditation that they leave their body and they're connected to their center. And other people get it in drugs, and other people just were born with it and have it. But this boy was born and raised the way I was, and that's why I'm just speaking out of this body to say those were my two biggest learnings that I needed to learn in order to be able to be my authentic self at all, ever, and with you, and value our oneness and our difference. Okay? They didn't teach that in my prep school.
Nope. Anyway,
okay.
Go ahead.
Next, I'm watching the clock. Okay. Then with my wife and her two kids, now my permanent love of my life, with her two boys in college and my two in their 30s, here we are able to get out of the bigger house, yes, that came from privilege, and instead sell everything and get rid of everything. First, we put it all in storage, and then we thought, whoa, whoever needs this again? We've gotten rid of almost everything. And we now live in a 700 square foot cottage in Berkeley behind a house. This was once a garage, and it was all renovated, and it is a wonderful cottage. And when we walked up to it and it had dirt on the side, we said, can we rent the dirt too? Because we like to build a deck so we're not just stuck inside. We want a deck for our hot tub and our table to eat outside. And they said, sure, if you pay for it. And we said, okay. So we now have all we need, 700 square feet and a little cottage with a hot tub and a table. And 2 bedrooms, because I put my office in 1 bedroom, and my wife has the tiny little bedroom for her whole office. She needs that. So here we are. Everything's fine. It's January 2000, right? Then we learn that this virus is going around. Well, I didn't have it. No, January 19th. I'm a year off, sorry. Because I've been healing for 18 months. January 19th. And we're in this cottage, and it's so wonderful. And thank God, now I know why the gift was that we got this. Because in February of 19, in a regular checkup, I was told I have stage 3 colorectal cancer. Stage 3, meaning it's lucky it's not stage 4, where it's already spreading to all the other organs, but it is outside the walls of the colon. And it is in all of the lymph nodes. So it's beginning to spread, and we better do surgery. And I went, no, I don't want to do surgery. What else can I do? They said, then you got to have extreme chemotherapy and radiation. And I went, no, I don't want to do that either. I want to do what I heard is the natural way. Like whoever just asked this question probably knows there are some people who do successfully the natural way of killing cancer, okay? But it's not studied as much. They don't have as much data as Western medicine has about those who don't make it, okay? And therefore they use chemo and radiation. So for better and worse, I want you to hear, I tried it all. I said, I don't want to do surgery. I want to kill it. What can I do? So we started such heavy chemotherapy, the newest, most modern versions. And oof, it already is changing my life. Pain and everything, brain losing thought, everything. But I did that for 6 months. When on the last day of chemotherapy, before I was going to do radiation, right at the same Kaiser Hospital here in Oakland, California, I caught COVID in the hospital. Of course, there were a lot of COVID patients there. And that was in July now. It had been 6 months. So in the last week of July, I caught COVID, and I didn't know it for a week until I could hardly breathe anymore. And my temperature was 104. And my wife had tried to take, and I was dry heaving in the sink on my knees, screaming with pain. I mean, the whole system is attacked. Well, now we know if we could only serve against it in the first week, we could help change it. But to get that in the first week, you had to be President Trump and have no problem. And actually be just as seriously hurt, and therefore be given the things that in the first week help you get rid of it, okay? The things we now know. Anyway, in the second week, after a week, when you get tested, it took another week to get the diagnosis. Well, you're not allowed in ER until you're diagnosed. So after 2 weeks, I can hardly breathe anything, which now in hindsight is way too late. They need to take us earlier. I go into ER, and within a day, they rush me into ICU. And within a day in ICU, they put me in the ventilator. And to which I, of course, said, no, I don't want the ventilator. I know that 80, 90% of the people die and don't come out the other end. I hear there's another lucky person here who doesn't have to identify, but who had that lucky experience to live after the ventilator. Aren't we lucky, you know? And I'm going to share with you about the experience I had outside the ventilator. Because after fighting to breathe and being unable to, what they did was they give me lots of, they force air and try to make you breathe it. Well, really, try to take that. I wish they'd done it more gently, but they must know I couldn't take it gently, so they force it. I couldn't, the lungs wouldn't allow it in. They were shut down. So I said, no, I can't do that, but I'm not getting in the vent. They took me. I had many experiences out of body in the ventilator. So I'm going to be very brief and tell you the biggest, most clear one was on the 2 days that they were telling my wife on cell phone while she had my cell phone, the camera watching me and talking to the doctors. They told her, we don't know if we can save him on this one. His lungs have totally collapsed. And the next night it was, okay, the next day, we got his lungs working mostly. There's some damage that's permanent, which is partly why my voice sounds the way it does now and why I coughed the way. If I coughed louder, you'd hear it was different. I won't give you that pleasure. So the other day was my heart failed. And I'm telling you, on both those days, just picture this. I was in a three-dimensional dome, a huge three-dimensional dome with hexagonal sections on it all around. And that's 6 sides. And picture that I was in as if I was in body at that form. So I can't tell you why this makes sense, but this is what I pictured, that I was in this hexagonal shape with 4 limbs tied to 4 of those 6 corners. Just like in the bed, we were all tied because we had to be, because otherwise we'd pull out these tubes that were here, 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 tubes here, here, tubes going in everywhere for blood, for food, in and out, for oxygen. We were just tubed. And we had to be tied so that we couldn't, and when we took the ropes off, they allowed us to have these huge mittens with which we couldn't do anything. So we still couldn't do it. Anyway, back to the dome. Here I am in this dome, in this section, and there are others of us up there, which I believe, I haven't yet proved scientifically, it matched the number who were in ICU in that hospital with me in those 2 days. I can't tell you that's a fact, but it felt like that. These other people were there with me that I assumed were in ICU and under ventilators also. And for 24 hours, I don't know what they were feeling, but I was feeling like I can do nothing except just live. That the soul, spirit level, all I can do is try to have this body live. Live, not another thought. Just live instead of die, and give it everything I've got. And I'm not exaggerating. That's 24 hours of it. I don't have a breath, so it's as if every breath is live, live. And in the morning, somebody came and put a key down at the bottom, as if there was a lock that unlocked all these gates. And all the other people except I went, and I actually felt like they were freed and I was stuck. And I go, what wrong? Mine broke. Please come back. And they didn't. I was stuck. And then I only realized when I came back, they had all passed. And I was the only one in the ICU who they were saved, they were able to save. And I was told later that was true. And a nurse came to me who had never seen a survivor. She worked in New York and here for all the months from March until August, this being August 16 to 26. And she had lost everybody. So she wanted to see somebody. And so I'm going off with this, but she came into my recovery room. And this next sentence is only about her. Picture, feel this, not about me. She just broke out crying until she could stop and said, you are the first that has survived, that I have spent all these months working on their bodies and helping them to survive if they could. Not one until you. And then she came and just had to just touch me. It's like, wow. So the gratitude now, amazing. But anyway, so I'm still up there for another 24 hours, live. And the next morning, somebody came and unlocked mine. And instead of going, I came back into this body again, just like in the car accident. And once I was fully in the body and alive, I couldn't speak very well because I still had so many drugs in me. And what they did, I've learned, is they took away the ones that got rid of any of my consciousness of what's happening, but they kept all the ones that got rid of all the pain. So I was beginning to think a little, and they put my wife on and said, he's here, we've saved him, he's alive. And I went, hi, and will you come pick me up today? Will you please bring my shoes? And they all had learned, of course, Louis, we'll bring your shoes. But they all knew I had at least 3 more months in the hospital recovering when I wasn't able even to leave my bed. I don't need to describe what our life becomes when we are in a bed for 3 months and not even able to get out. And we can't breathe except with a machine 24/7, 24/7. And then 80% of the time. And then less oxygen, and then less oxygen, until we learn that this air we're breathing now is only 21% oxygen. But even that, the lung wasn't able to handle. Remember, it couldn't handle 1% of oxygen. The lungs are so destroyed. And now they think they've healed the lungs, and they're trying to get the lungs to take 21% oxygen when it can't even take 1. So they give us 100% of the oxygen we need until we only need them to give us 80 and 60. But it's all still in machines and wearing these things and masks all the time. Anyway, that was that. And so I started talking, not making much sense, and said, pick me up today, and talked to my wife and said, oh, where do you live? I didn't remember where we lived. And when she said, it's all right, you just came out of the ventilator and you'll be good. I said, I wasn't in a ventilator. Remember? I decided not to. Anyway, that's enough. It goes on and on and on and on and on. And the recovery is amazing. And I can tell you without even listing them all now, from the voice and damage in the lungs and weaker heart and neuropathy and others, that there are many side effects, and some of them permanent, and some of them maybe, we hope not permanent. And I'm not able to complain about one of them. I can feel them, but the gratitude for having lived and breathing air, it took 6 months to be able to do it by getting rid of the machines. So I never need another machine. And we just wore those things on our fingers. Some of you remember what they're called. Here's the oxygen and here's the heart. I still have it, and I still sometimes need it, but I'm done. I have lots of side effects, but I'm alive and I'm here. I'm here with you. So that's it. Open for questions, statements, disbeliefs, challenges, anything you want. I'm all light and love and spirit right here with you.
Unmute myself. There we go. Thank you, Louis. Wow, 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 wow. So people, please write your questions or comments into the chat for Louis. We do have a few here already. I'll read the first one. The question comes to you from Angela Lewis, and she says, do you find that many head injuries and bumps, hits, contusions are a wake-up call because before something more serious was going to happen? So I guess, yeah, she's wondering if you think they were preparing you for your most recent experience.
There's no question in my mind. I'm so open to, remember, the door is wide open. I receive so much from the universe, and I've really learned, the shortest answer, I've really learned to my best ability every moment to be before I do anything. And if I can, to the extent I can do that, I really believe I can avoid any more of these serious crises. I believe I'm able to learn without it having to be so critical. I might be wrong, and that might be arrogant, but I believe, like some of you have done successfully, it's possible. But yes, I believe, not only in hindsight, but then I believed that that one was a calling for what I needed to learn then. And that one was a calling for something I needed to learn then that I didn't yet have, that I can now integrate, that we're all one, and so am I right at my authentic core, and so are you. All light. All the damages are external of soul. Wow. And then I needed to learn more of what I've learned in this process. So yeah, I hope the crises are done and I can just keep learning more easily. But you never know. It might be that now I'm ready for the next one. I'm not in charge.
Our next question, thank you, Louis. Our next question, we have several more questions. So our next question is from Robert, and he'd like to know, are you experiencing after effects of COVID, such as blood clotting issues, etc.?
Yes, I'm experiencing after effects not only of chemo and also radiation. Because just picture when radiation goes in, it's not a bullet that touches only the spot they're trying to touch. Radiation kills and damages much of what's around what they tried to do. And chemo kills all cells, which is why they try to notice how much are you doing at the bottom of what you can handle. Whereas CBD, we've learned, kills only cancer cells. So use it. Anyway, so yes, I have not only things still from cancer and chemo and radiation, but yes, from COVID and all the drugs that they put in to save my life and all the damage to the lungs and the heart. But luckily it's enough so that I can breathe. And I would say only about 10% of my lungs is dysfunctional. There are people still who need the oxygen tanks and might forever. I know one who needs oxygen forever, and she walks around her apartment with it and can only go outside with portable oxygen, which I had for my last week or two, portable oxygen when I went out to get groceries. Yeah, I used it when I drove across the country with my wife, and at 10,000 feet, when I normally would get a little headache, I needed oxygen from the portable. But yeah, I still have, I don't breathe as well. I don't cough as well. I don't speak as well. When I talk too long, it gets worse. I have a little, every now and then my heart goes, oh, there it goes again. And it's a clot. It's not a ripped rib or muscle. It's a clot that if it lasts, it could kill me and have a stroke or whatever. But I get few of them. And yeah, there's other brain damage that is, maybe 90% recovered now, but not fully. Like what's the word we use for, I do that right openly, and I haven't needed to do it here, but had I needed to, I would have. You would have all heard me say it. And it's just a word that I haven't used since before the recovery. And I have to go through this process. And recovery is about, you're not learning anything from scratch. You may feel like it. It's like all the data is in the computer somewhere. So you're looking to find new synapses to go to a location where it can be found, how to do this. Or you create new ones and redoing it. But there's a lot of relocating, okay, instead of starting from scratch. Those are a lot of answers, but they're all yeses. Next.
Wow. Thank you, Louis. The next question is from Tanya. She says, hi, Louis. Yes, I had COVID-19, was in my lungs, was bad with shortness of breath, burning, areas in my lungs hurt. Homeopathy saved me from going to the hospital. Think it can heal some of your residual lung damage, lung issues. I had lung surgery at the age of 35, upper left lobectomy.
Wow.
So I know we have another person in the Toronto community who was on a respirator. So we've got a few of them in the Toronto community.
Thank you. And if I were running the show, I'd say, then let's stay another hour and hear from all of you. I'm not running it. So either they are our future speakers or you want them to say something now, that's up to you and up to them. But I'm really grateful you're here, and I really have some idea of what you've gone through, but I didn't have to go through the lung surgery. Oh, and the only tube I was lucky not to have was the, whatever you call it, in the throat. See, I can't remember the word. Do you?
Tracheotomy, tracheostomy.
Thank you. I didn't have to have that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But therefore, I'm sorry to you who had to have your lung surgery, but I get it.
Mhm. Our next question comes from Marina. We have a whole bunch of questions here. Marina asked, what was your major learning with your third experience? So that's the COVID. Or why do you think you needed to have it? Also, when you have brain injuries and have no consciousness, do you think your conscious awareness is still contained in your energy field somewhere, but you just can't access it?
Yes, to the second one. And then so let me do the second one first, because this is amazing. The short version is, after a year of trauma therapy, and we've all had trauma, we're not going to compete about whose trauma was worse, but the word trauma applies to each of us for falling off our bike when we were 8, compared to a child being raped or falling off a cliff and dying, or abuse. It's all trauma to the system, the neuro system, as well as the physical and the spiritual system, even though the soul is not damaged, does not die, and the soul is not what was traumatized, is what I believe. Scientists haven't told me I'm right yet. Sorry. And because I therefore had trauma therapy for a whole year, during which I was asking myself that very question, going, all right, I trust that trauma didn't allow me to experience the incredible horror of what happened when that tree landed on my head and all that blood and pus and where. So I said, but I would like to discover, now that I'm a little bit more recovered, I actually would like to be able to discover what happened, not from hearing it from somebody. I did that 20 years later. I took my wife and both my kids to the same river, went to the same spot. The same guides who had been with us drove from 5 hours and came and told us exactly what happened. It was amazing. However, that's not what I'm talking about now. I'm talking about that I wanted to find what within my own consciousness I was able to regain. If anything, I'm ready for it now. Okay? And so I was taken to the trauma leader in the country named Peter Levine. He's written several books on it. Something about, I have it, the lion, releasing the lion, what? There, Aldoness, almost said it. I was his guinea pig on stage at his annual conference of all trauma therapists. I was taken up and he said, hello, what can I do for you? And I said, I want you, if you can, to uncover, take me to that place in my memory and my consciousness for what happened. And he said, okay, close your eyes, and sort of hypnotized me and took me. And I experienced 3 things. So let me say, this memory doesn't come back in the form of pictures, like I watched it, you know, this memory came back in form of memory of the moment and consciousness. First, I'm dying. I can't die. I have to live. Like, I gotta live. I have to live. I have to live. Just like I had up in the dome. So I have these experiences that we are able to just want to live, and our mind, body, spirit does everything possible to live when that's the threat. I want to live. I have to live. And my children, I lived. And once I got, and I'm still under the tree, okay? This is a moment, and I'm alive. Okay, now that I'm alive, acting as if everything else is fine, there's 2 other things aren't fine. One is, and I started to cry on stage, where's my boy? Where's Ian? Literally, I was crying. Where is he? Somehow I didn't wonder where my daughter is, because I must have sensed she was okay. Where's Ian? And somehow I got, he was there and he was alive. How on earth did I get that? Did I hear what they were saying? Maybe, I don't know. And when I got, my son is alive. I stopped crying. And I got the third thing, which is, okay. I mean, I'm simplifying on purpose to keep it simple. Okay, I'm alive and my son's fine. Now with this tree on my head, what the heck am I now got to do to survive, not just live, to recover? And from that moment on, that's where I was. And he was able to help me recover those out of my consciousness. All right, I did remember your first question. What was the biggest learning? Well, that was one of the biggest learnings.
Yeah, the learning from the third experience was Marina's son. Yeah,
the learning from the third experience was not only that wow, our consciousness does have and is able to hold all of our experiences. So in my real life, I try, and with my wife and with my kids, I try to see what we can reach, what we can get back, even though I'm not a therapist at hypnotizing them. I like opening to it. And I find the more I'm able to open to, the more I'm able to recover. Okay, that's the biggest learning. Do I have other learnings? But yeah, I have learnings about, how not to complain about all these side effects. I'm not kidding. I can't really play tennis fully yet because I can't go to the shots on the corner. I have trouble walking. My feet are just numb and tingling, and I don't even remember when I have shoes or socks on. And when my sandals fall off when I get out of the car, sometimes it's 10 feet away, and I look down and go, "Oh, I don't have a shoe on," because I can't feel in my feet. Well, that's the one I can laugh about the most, but it's not fun. So yeah, I have another learning is I can't complain about anything. I can tell you what they are, but I can't complain. I lived through that experience, and I'm here, and I don't need an oxygen tank. I can breathe. Okay, next.
Oh, we've got lots of questions here. This one's from Mark. He's asking you briefly, what is the treatment that you thought you were going to do for the cancer when you had decided to forego chemotherapy or radiation?
Great. And then I changed my mind and said to go with it. There are many. My wife would be able to tell you all of them because she did all the research, and it's in files of water, a pipe that high. But one of them is stop all sugar. All sugar. And whatever becomes sugar, even sucrose, not just fructose, but natural sugar, fruit, everything for a minute, because all sugar feeds cancer. The only reason cancer cells start to grow more than they're supposed to is because they've got this sugar. Okay, it's not the only reason. Stress causes it, but the other one is stress causes it. As chill, meditate, yoga. I'm serious. All of these things. Next, eat only certain healthy things, all veggies, but most, not all, and some nuts, but not all. I can't remember the list. You have to get the list of what is okay, what isn't. And then you'd have to do weird things like take broccoli sprouts and put them all together and put them into something that you can eat. Ugh, it's too bitter. Put them then in a smoothie. Okay, but there are certain foods that help kill the cancer and the body survive. Then you do other things. I tried. You can do electrical stimulation. Some people believe it works, some people don't. I don't mean radiation. And I don't know the rest, but there are not. I said, I'm going to research, or my wife's going to research all, and I want to do all. And then I saw the statistics and read a book about what percent they know do it. And then I heard, well, stage 1, I would have done that for sure. Stage 3, when it's already out the walls, I think I better do this. I'm sorry. I better let go and do the chemo and the radiation. Stage 4, you must do the chemo and the radiation and all these things and believe that you can fix it. And if none of that's true, then you'll be lucky to be, tell me her name, the one we've all heard, who had four all over her body and it only stopped in the light. And now she's written a book and talked to all of us.
I need a more Janny.
Thank
I need
you.
a more Janny. Yeah.
Next question.
Awesome. Okay. Next question is from Paul. He says, hi, Lewis. Do you feel that your destiny was predetermined?
I love it. And one answer is yes. There was a guy who came to me in a workshop once that said, he never met me. He just listened to me talk at something, and he came up to me and he said, Lewis, how does it feel to have a soul so different than the body it's landed in this time? What are you doing with that? That was pretty weird and pretty direct. And all I could say then, and now I know is true, is this is the body I was called into. And some people believe I chose even to come into this body. But compared to the two prior lives I really know a lot about that weren't this body, and I know what bodies they were, they're different. So yes, I believe that for some reason I was called into this body. And I wondered, you know, when I told you how I grew up, I was wondering as a kid, well, why am I here and you're there? And if I really believed, like my parents said, that we're all one, I've never became a jerk. I always was able to go, with every single one of you, I know we're all just as one as the other and just as good as the other. I don't like that I was taught that I'm better, that I have more, because I don't like looking at you and think I'm better. You know what that would do to our relationship? There would be zero of real energy. You know what it feels like when people are, even when they're doing what I call legal compliance to be fair and equitable to one of you people. It's like, you all know what that feels like. Even I know what that feels like. When a Black woman does that to me, instead of seeing who we really are, you know? So yes, I believe I was called to be in this body and to do this work and to have the childhood I had and to have the skills I was given to do the things I did from being, and then to learn some of the things I have learned that now have me more advanced, more mature than my last lifetime and the one before. It makes total sense to me. So I actually now I'm looking forward to what I need to learn next and hope it doesn't have to hurt so much to get it. But if it does, I'll get it. I'm here to get it from each of you.
Awesome, Lewis. We have a lot of questions still. Okay, this one's from
good.
Janice.
I got 5 more hours.
We won't go that long. This question is from Janice. She says, what is your experience and wisdom knowledge of your higher self versus the soul and God?
Well, it's a great example of what are words and how well do they describe anything?
Oh, sorry. She has more to her question. Sorry. Sometimes my understanding is that the soul can be shattered or fragmented in severe trauma. Do you have an understanding of this?
I have to always say, like any of us does, if we don't, you can't trust them. We all have to say, I don't know anything about what science can prove. I just know my experience. And it may not be accurate and may not be helpful, may or may not be. I'm still learning the distinction between soul and spirit. My feeling and my experience is that that the soul is what has been in each of these bodies, and my spirituality is more about the energy with which I feel and exist and am. That's spiritual, and the body's the body, and my higher self, I like those words too, feels to me very similar to my core self, which I'm able to have within each of my chakras and all the way out the eighth chakra into the pure light, and the source from which my higher self comes. But here in the body, with which it's fed, if you will, the source of its energy. But in this body, it's now integrated with this body and this life experience and this human being that I am. And so my higher self, I think, is a combination. It includes me and this. But it's not my higher self when it's just me and just an ego, right? And just in personality. That's not my higher self. It's just my body. About soul being damaged, I'm totally open. I would love to learn from everyone else who has no scientific knowledge yet, but some scientists are getting closer to some of these things. Remember, there was a time when I thought the earth was flat and you thought it was round, right? And that's as high as we were. There was a time when Thomas Jefferson, this brilliant man, had then these ideas for how to have community and still had slaves because, they couldn't take care of themselves and he was helping them. Our consciousness is only as far as it is, and where our children are evolving on our shoulders, and we are each evolving in our own life learnings, right? So I don't know the right answer. Thank you for asking the question, because that means I have to be more careful to say there's some part of our essential self. I feel like it's some permanent aspect of ourselves that isn't itself, can't be killed and isn't itself damaged. It's some other aspect, whether it's the body or the spirit or who knows. I'd like to learn the right answer. So that's why that's a great question. And why I am not only not afraid of not being right anymore, I was trained growing up that I was always right. It is such a relief to not be right and to not know. Thank you. Next.
All righty. Our next is a question and a comment from Marina. And Marina says, I absolutely loved your talk. So incredibly affirming and inspiring. Thank you. Your personality is one of great warmth and wisdom. She says, Marina asks, are you going to write a book about this?
Everybody tells me I should write a book about all these different experiences, and you haven't heard all the learnings and diversity, but you can imagine you have your own. We all do. And how I've been raised, and my experiences in love and parenting and bipolar child and all the rest. Maybe I should. So far, the reason I haven't, I've written a couple articles, but I'll tell you, this particular personality, the way I was raised and the gifts I was given, absolutely, I've been able to talk anytime, forever. I've had audiences of 1,000 and I can talk, or one. It doesn't matter. I never learned to talk or speak or Toastmasters or anything. I've learned how, in fact, to stop it. To be a coach is to shut up. The answer is within the client. Ask a question only. Don't say a thing about all your wisdom and how you learned it. I've had to learn all that. So I don't know. I don't know exactly. In fact, let me hear the question again, because I lost a piece of it that I wanted to go to.
She basically asked you, are you going to write a book about this?
No, thank you. Okay. So, thank you. The piece I got to is, I can talk forever, but I sit down ever since my too structured education that was too rigid and too righteous. I sit down at a piece of paper and I'm supposed to write, and I go, and then I have to do an outline. And instead of creative women in my life who taught me, just do a tree with every word you think of, write it somewhere out there, and later you can organize it. But the way I was going was, oh, I need to do Roman numeral part 1, and 2, and A, B, C under that, and then a little, and I have to do it linearly. It's like, oh, the greatest problem, at least that I have, I won't say every other straight white male has, but I believe we have more of it than anyone else, is so linear in the left frontal lobe thinking that we actually believe, when you ask us how much of our learning is verbal and nonverbal, I really believed 85 to 90% of it was purely verbal. Like, didn't you hear what I said? Whew. It is such a relief to learn that it's actually the opposite. About 15%, I'm told, is verbal, and the rest is energy, body language, perspective, life experience, tone of voice, and everything. So I'm learning a lot.
Thanks, Louis. Your next question, she has a couple of questions here, is from Shala. And she is wondering if you can tell us a little bit about those other 2 past lives of yours.
Oh my God. Yeah, one is easy. I know them both, but the first one, I had a reading and heard that my current daughter and I were together in 350 BC, that I was a monk, or whatever the word was then, BC, and she was an oracle. And I didn't really value the deep meaning of the word oracle, but now I do, although it's not written this way in the dictionary. It's for that amazing wisdom, intuitive wisdom and truth that we all have access to. That's the way I'll be safe. We all have access to. But in human form, females do a better job of it than males, of having easier access to it. I might already have protests, but at least, that extra eye, that intuition, the way women relate first, whereas men don't relate first. We go, is this safe? And we have lots of gifts different than women, and women have lots of gifts. And every one of those are normal shaped statistical curves that overlap, so that woman might lift 300 pounds and I can't lift 100 or whatever. So I'm being totally stereotypical and saying the oracle really has the truth. And then women threatened men by having such wisdom, and they were often killed. And in this case, my daughter was imprisoned in the monastery with drugs and sexual abuse. That's how they kept her down. And I said, okay. Now I understand why she picked the bipolar mother. She would understand that. My chemistry has been so even, I don't have a clue what it feels like to be bipolar. Yes, I laugh and cry and have, but none of this. So why was I picked? And of course, I was afraid of the answer. And I was very pleased when the answer was, you were one of the priests. And I'm going, uh-oh. But if these are the learnings I need to deal with and forgive myself for drugging her and sexually abusing her, then that's what I need to learn. But you all notice how difficult it is to imagine if that's what you need to learn. If you were you Hitler? Were you a killer? Were you okay? And the truth is, we each were sometimes those things. Okay. So I was told, no, you were the only priest who noticed what was happening and tried to stop it. And when you couldn't stop it, you reported it to all with power then to try to uncover it and change it. And because you reported it, you were defrocked and kicked out of the monastery. But Ashley, current name Ashley, this soul, learned that you were the only male who interacted with her in a 100% safe, non-sexualized, non-power over way. And that's why she chose me. And I'm not exaggerating. This is something now that almost no place else I dare say, but I'm telling you the truth, that when I was pre-med once, so they let me help the surgery, even though it wasn't vaginal, it was the C-section. The son was vaginal and popped out, and I did it and cut the cord, and that was easy. But this one was C-section, and since I was pre-med, I was in there going, whoa, that's the pancreas? And my wife is going, Lewis, what are you doing? I have just found your pancreas. And then I didn't be the surgeon who cut the uterus, but once the surgeon, cut the uterus, I pulled my daughter out of the uterus, cut open with blood, and wiped the blood off, cut the cord, and held her up and looked at her and looked in her eyes, just like I would look in your eyes to see you and let yourself see me. But that wasn't all that happened. 2 bolts of light shot out of her eyes straight into mine. I'm not kidding. And because I had already come back from the first experience in the light, at least I didn't freak out and drop her or go, a devil has arrived. I looked at her and went, whoa, you have come to change my life. And I welcome you. That was that prior life. And she and her mother thinks I'm full of it still when I share this, but my daughter believes that, yes, Dad. When I'm with Mom, I'll listen to that, but when I'm with you, thank you. All right.
That is awesome. Oh, are you going to tell us your next one? Okay, go ahead.
Well, the second one, yeah, and the learning. By the way, the soul is the same soul, keeps having different learning. But what I liked about that, that was the same person. I know every female I know, my daughter, my stepdaughters, girlfriends, friends, know that I just actually am lucky that I'm not one of those men who has any inappropriate sexual energy toward them, nor any desire for any power over them. I got that with my father, and I'm lucky. My wives, that's a different story. They all left, too much spirit or whatever, are all been equal in terms of whatever our strength and our skills are. I just love equity. I love equity. I hate having power over. I hate having power under. I love equity. We need to give each other equity, all of us, so we can live in peace and equity and everybody being their fullest self. The second one, somehow I hate doing the details, but I was told in the second one that I was a king, a specific king at a certain time. And I went, okay, really? Our soul comes and goes and all. And I and my prior wife were together in that prior life. She was there with me, and she was not my queen then in 1600s. She was my favorite lover that I loved the most, and even had a separate room in the castle just for us. And I went there with her and my stepdaughters and her, and she just was freaking out. She just had to go through it all. You could just feel it. And I actually was feeling it going, wow. Because that king, I was told when I read history, and he's in history, was similar to this guy in this body, which is, I don't need this much power over these other countries. Let's just minimize it more, and let's be more equitable, you know? And I can't explain why I didn't love my queen as much as this other woman. And now I'm one of these weird 10%ers who believes in total monogamy is the greatest intimacy on earth. I have no interest in anyone else except my one. And I've never broken the monogamy. But that wasn't who this king was, but that's maybe not the way any male was then. I don't know. I just know I'm not that now. But I learned a lot then.
Awesome.
And,
Well,
and the current one, the third one, I don't know as much detail about, is that my current and final wife forever is finally, for both of us, the most amazing fit that we've ever wanted, and the others never made it. Her prior had affairs, many affairs, and my multiple each had an affair. Why? Too much spirituality for them or something. Too much. We are one together forever. But we were told that we had been twins. And the reason we feel like we're just looking at, in those eyes is just somebody I know 100% is because, yes, you were twins. No wonder you know each other so well. But I didn't get if we were identical twins as either male or female or just regular twins. But my mother's an identical twin, so I even know the difference. Okay, next.
Anyway, we're out of questions and we're running out of time. So Lewis, there are a number of other comments, but just on behalf of everyone here, it's been an incredible presentation. So thank you very much. Even though you can't hear us, everybody, let's show our hands and applaud for Lewis. It was absolutely fabulous. Thank you for this absolutely amazing presentation, Lewis.
Well, I appreciate it. And I've been a trainer all these 40 years. And you know what I learned? That out of everybody here, if I've done well enough so that most of you think, yeah, this was pretty good, I like this. There's one on one extreme who says, this is the best one you've ever had. And there's one in the other extreme that goes, where did you get this jerk? He's just another white guy and he just really doesn't, he'll probably sell a book and make money on it or something. And I don't believe him. Anyway, I thank you all.
Thank you, Lewis. Your presentation was incredible. So I'm now just going to give some closing announcements before we wrap up. So thank you, everybody, for coming. And our next Toronto Awakening Sharing Group event in October, we will not be doing our own little task sharing circle. We are joining in with the Spiritual Awakenings International sharing circles from this point forward. So you know how we've been doing sharing circles every other month. So we invite you to join with the Spiritual Awakenings International sharing circle, which will be on Saturday, October the 2nd. And I'll be sending you that announcement through the TASC mailing list. If there are some of you here who are not yet on the Toronto Awakenings mailing list, please sign up so you'll get our announcements. It's at torontooawakenings.org, and that is how you can get onto our mailing list. Our next speaker event is going to be in November, and we're really delighted that one of our local people, Linju Alias, who's originally from India but now living in Brampton, Ontario, will be presenting in November, Saturday, November 27th. And she's going to be talking about a research study that she did on near-death experiences while she was still living in India. So this is going to be a very interesting presentation. And I want to mention that Toronto Awakening Sharing Group is affiliated with Spiritual Awakenings International. We're in a SAI affiliated group. And if you've not yet subscribed to be on the SAI mailing list, you can do that at the SAI website, which is spiritualawakeningsinternational.org. And both mailing lists are free, so you don't have to pay anything. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that some of you may or may not know is that Toronto Awakening Sharing Group, which was founded 2 years ago, there were 3 co-leaders, and it was myself Monica Morin, and Dr. Shira Taylor. And after 2 years of doing a fabulous job as co-leaders, for various reasons, Monica and Shira have decided to step down from co-leading Toronto Awakening Sharing Group. So I'm now leading it solo. So I'm inviting anybody who might be interested in volunteering or possibly even co-leading Toronto Awakenings. Let me know. Be welcome to have some volunteer support, whatever way you're able to do it. We do have one volunteer, and he's got his screen off right now, which is Joe Lagan, and he has been a volunteer right from the beginning. There he is. There's Joe. Thank you so much to Joe. Joe has been maintaining our website and helping behind the scenes with events. So right now, Joe and I are the team that are keeping Toronto Awakening Sharing Group going. But if any of you'd like to pitch in, just email me at info@torontooakenings.org. So basically, that's it for today. So thank you everybody for coming, and bye until next time.